The history of every single Gomora iteration ever, in detail, in one video, from 1967 to the modern day, both behind the scenes and in universe. Ugh, what have I gotten myself into? Gomora, the Prince of the Monsters, one of the most popular Ultraman Kaiju of them all. Being so well known, Tsuburaya Productions has brought the creature back again and again, and thus new stories are constantly being added to his historic legacy. Doing this huge topic of the history of Gomora justice will be a massive undertaking, but I'm ready for the challenge. Let's jump back in time to 1967, where it all began. Episodes 26 and 27 of the original Ultraman show were the only two-part episodes in that entire series, and were written by head Ultraman writer Tetsuo Kenjo, in a collaboration with Bunzo Wakatsuki. The monster in their screenplay was the first to fight Ultraman to a draw, and of course, Gomora was that monster. Toll Narita, responsible for the designs of many Ultraman Kaiju, seems to have handled designing the monster. He supposedly based the shape of Gomora's head off the helmet of Kuroda Nagamasa, a Japanese daimyo from the 1500s. One source claimed that Gomora was at first supposed to have an extra head crest, which a later iteration of Gomora would instead receive years later. These images shown in episode 26 may have actually been additional concept art of Gomora, which was repurposed. Gomora was named after the ancient city of the same name, which is mentioned in the Bible. It was one of two wicked cities destroyed with fire and brimstone by God in the book of Genesis for the sins of the people who dwelled there. This name perhaps provides a clue to the moral of these two Ultraman episodes. Greedy humans attempt to take a monster captive and display it at the World's Fair despite the danger, and a city suffers as a result. I did, however, run across one source that suspected the name may have instead been influenced by Godzilla and Mothra's Japanese names, Gojira and Mosura, respectively. With the limited amount of material available on the origins of the monster, I can't be certain either way. By the way, the second destroyed city in the Bible was Sodom, which also got an Ultraman monster named after it in Ultraman Dyna. Gomora's suit was worn by Kunio Suzuki, who'd played at least 4 other Ultraman monsters previously. And the Kaiju's iconic roar was a reused Gaira roar from Toho's War of the Gargantuas, combined with an elephant noise from the Hanna-Barbera sound effect library. The monster now had a story, a suit, a name, an actor, and a roar. It was time to begin filming. In universe, the original Gomora stood 40 meters tall and weighed 20,000 metric tons, and was a descendant of a species of dinosaur known as Gomorasaurus. When you think about it, this is kind of like Godzilla's origin story. But we'll get into the similarities between Godzilla and Gomora later on. There are several. Anyway, in The Prince of Monsters Part 1, a group of scientists went on an expedition to the uninhabited Johnson Islands, hoping to capture a living kaiju and display it at the World's Fair. When Gomora suddenly revealed itself by smashing its way out of the side of a mountain, a professor begged the Science Patrol to transport the monster to Osaka for him, by putting the monster to sleep with a tranquilizer and airlifting it with the jet VTOLs. The team reluctantly agreed. The operation at first went smoothly, but a change in temperature resulted in Gomora waking up too early, so they had to cut the struggling monster loose outside of Osaka. Somehow, the incredibly tough monster survived the fall unharmed, and now Osaka was in danger. The Science Patrol and the military launched an all-out attack against the monster, but it escaped by burrowing, and everyone was now on edge about when and where it would resurface. It reappeared briefly outside of a construction site, and that's when Ultraman appeared to battle the monster. However, Gomora's brute strength and powerful tail proved to be too much for even the mighty Ultraman to handle, and the weakened hero was unable to fire his spacium beam in time. Gomora escaped again, and Ultraman was forced to retreat before his energy was completely drained. The rest of the story is related in The Prince of Monsters Part 2. Gomora resurfaced again, this time in the middle of the city. The Science Patrol attacked once more, this time burning off Gomora's powerful tail. But even this didn't stop the rampaging monster, and it burrowed away again. Plus, the severed tail proved to be a threat even when not attached to Gomora. It bounced and flopped around the city after being knocked off. Eventually, though, the tail was shot down, and that was the tail end. But Gomora was on the move again, and this time the creature was headed toward Osaka Castle, the city's most famous landmark. Guess if the castle can survive the wrath of Gomora. Think hard now. Don't forget, the Science Patrol is on the case, and their honor is on the line. Yeah, Gomora completely wrecked it. Ultraman showed up for a rematch against the monster, and this time had the upper hand, since Gomora had no tail. But the monster still wouldn't go down easily. Ultraman knocked 2 of the Kaiju's horns off, but Gomora still wasn't done, and tried to burrow away yet again. This time, though, Ultraman prevented the monster from escaping, and finally finished off the now completely mutilated Kaiju.
Ow, that's hot! Okay, now I can die.
When you think about it, the tale of this first Gomora is quite tragic. The Kaiju never intended to cause any trouble and was living a peaceful life on an uninhabited island, until it was suddenly airlifted to a completely foreign area out of the blue and dropped from the sky. Subsequently, the military tried to destroy it, followed by Ultraman. And yet, Gomora was incredibly resilient and fought extremely hard until the end. In comparison to another powerful monster, Red King, who bullied other monsters and totally deserved what he got, the 1967 Gomora was a highly sympathetic creature. But though his story seemed to have ended, and on a desolating note, it turned out that the saga of the Monster Prince had only just begun. Okay, now things start to get a little weird. Much like King, who I covered recently, Gomora next had to go through a bit of a dark age, thanks to several extremely low-budget shows Subaraya Productions aired in the early 70s that featured famous Ultraman monsters portrayed with cheap and floppy costumes. Gomora appeared in the final episode of Ultra Fight and battled Wu in a very interesting location, Subaraya Productions' costume warehouse. The Monster Prince took down his opponent and then disappeared. Interestingly, a figure apparently exists of this obscure iteration of Gomora, but we'll get into toys at the end of the video. Next, Gomora appeared in the Redman series, in at least 9 episodes, succumbing to the hero of the show every time. Apparently, a suit designed for stage shows was used to portray the monster here, which of course was nowhere near the quality of the original suit. Gomora must have realized it needed to turn its career around, and the Kaiju had a plan to do just that. A big plan involving a theatrical film, and it wasn't a very good plan. The 6 Ultra Brothers versus the Monster Army released in Thailand in 1974, and was a joint venture between Subaraya Productions and the Thai company Chayo Productions. It is an oddity, that's for sure, featuring, among other strange things, a random Mirror Man Kaiju thrown into the army of monsters just because. And I'm sure you're all expecting me to say Gomora appeared in the film as well. But no, we got something even better than that. Allow me to introduce to you Gomora's evolved form, Super Gomora. Yeah. I couldn't find much behind-the-scenes info on this, unique variant of Gomora, except one site claims that the suit actor that played the original version of the monster, Kunio Suzuki, reprised his role in this movie, which would be cool if it's true. The name Super Gomora apparently comes from a Japanese picture book. Let's quickly see what this Gomora was up to in universe so we can move right along. Super Gomora awakened alongside the rest of a monster army when a rocket test went awry, and immediately he and the others began wreaking havoc. Gomora temporarily pursued 2 main characters of the film, and then began showing off an array of several new, and rather confusing abilities. But the tide slowly began to turn for the Kaiju. The combined force allied against him was too much, and Super Gomora was finished off rather violently. Even if there were some who were willing to look past how bizarre this new version of Gomora was and thought he was cool, I'm sure Gomora was still unhappy. The 6 Ultra Brothers versus the Monster Army would eventually end up being unofficially disowned by Subaraya Productions due to continued legal disputes with Chayo, and thus none of it is probably canonical, so Gomora still hadn't cleared its name. But the Kaiju would get one more chance to turn things around before the end of the Showa Era, in the final official Showa Ultra Series show, Ultraman 80. Did the Kaiju get it done? Well, let's find out. Gomora made its grand return to the canonical Ultra Series in episode 22 of Ultraman 80, which aired on August 27th, 1980. He was one of just 3 returning monsters in the show, and was given a noticeable redesign, courtesy of Osamu Yamaguchi. The concept art for Gomora II featured the extra head crest Gomora I had missed out on, and different-looking skin, and the suit ended up matching the drawing pretty closely. Not only was the monster's appearance modified, well, I'll show you by describing what happened in the show. Prepare to have your mind blown. Gomora II was apparently a creature that hid underground during an ice age, and was transformed by underground heat, It was awakened when a war broke out between humans living on the surface and a kingdom of underground men. The episode was about this war, but Gomora had to show up at the end to give Ultraman 80 someone to fight. The military attacked the kaiju, but Gomora had missiles? That's right, somehow thousands of years exposed to underground heat resulted in the monster being able to fire missiles. Well, can't say I've actually spent enough time underground to confirm that's an impossibility, so we'll just accept it and... Whoa! What is all this craziness?
Wow, the underground heat gave him tons of superpowers! I've got to get in on this. Guess it's time for some more burrowing. Haven't done this since my voice was even more obnoxious. This could get exciting.
Despite the monster's unnatural and overpowered abilities, Ultraman 80 was able to take down Gomora II with a hit from his beam attack, and the monster collapsed into the ground, never resurfacing again. In the Showa Era, anyway. But Gomora's story would continue. On to the Heisei Era. Ultraman the Ultimate Hero brought back most of the popular monsters from the original Ultraman show in new, powered forms. And of course they weren't going to skip Gomora. Powered Gomora seems to have been designed by Mahiro Maeda, and had a forked tongue, spikes on the back of his legs, and a few other additions. I love how the concept art for Powered Gomora provides a glimpse into what was going on inside the suit. Looks like there may have been some advanced mouth-related mechanics within the costume. Powered Gomora appeared in Episode 11. A perfectly preserved relative of the extinct Gomorosaurus species, a dinosaur that liked wet climates in this continuity, was discovered in the Andes Mountains and brought back to display at a museum in Los Angeles. The problem was that the monster was so well preserved that it was still alive. Don't quite know how that was missed. Gomora woke up one stormy night and started wandering around L.A. For some reason, it seems no action was taken by anyone until morning, and by then no one knew where the kaiju had wandered off to. Eventually, the show's defense team found Gomora swimming in a river and shot him with a tranquilizer so they could transfer the kaiju. But just like in the original Ultraman, Gomora woke up in midair and had to be dropped, and survived again. Gomora stumbled about in a densely populated area, destroying many buildings. It was staggering from being dehydrated after just taking a swim in a river. Ultraman Powered arrived, but barely had to do anything. The monster collapsed and died from its dehydration, and Powered comforted it as it passed on. Its body was then put on display, as it seems they'd been originally intending. And that was, Powered Gomora. Don't know quite how he earned that title, but anyway. Gomora didn't make any official appearances for the next 10 years, because most of the shows until Ultraman Max only had new kaiju. But, of course, as soon as it became acceptable to bring back old favorites again, Gomora returned. The 21st episode of Ultraman Max featured a Gomora that finally went back to the original design, except with a reddish coloration, particularly on the horns. The same suit was also used in the following show, Ultraman Mebius, so we'll cover both appearances one after the other now. In the Max universe, the Gomora species is typically a human-sized creature, native to the fictional Republic of Phrygia. However, a terrorist organization smuggled 5 of these little guys into Japan and experimented on them in an attempt to transform them into weapons of mass destruction. One was successfully enlarged after the terrorists put it through horrifying experiments, and the kaiju killed the last remaining terrorist and escaped with his smaller cousins. Some hikers eventually ran across one of the smaller ones, alerting Dash that monsters were in the area. The defense team discovered the large one and forced it to retreat, but it soon reappeared and stomped toward a village, and Dash could not stop his advance. But of course we never expected them to, am I right? Ultraman Max took the violent monster on, and was able to chop Gomora's tail off. Yum. In an obvious reference to the monster's first appearance. This didn't work out too well for Max, because the tail ended up protecting Gomora from a finishing blow. But if one finisher fails, why not try another one? That did it. In Mebius, Gomora was briefly shown stomping around somewhere in the Johnson Islands, but it was reported to have vanished without a trace. Turns out, a mysterious Choju belonging to Yapul had assimilated the Gomora as well as a Red King. When Mebius bested the Red King later on, the Monster Prince appeared in its place. Already weak from fighting another violent monster, Mebius was lucky to have help from Guys, who knocked Gomora's tail off again and destroyed it. Mebius changed forms, and he and guys were able to blow Gomora up. And with that, we've completed the pre-Ultra Galaxy era of Gomora's history. Throughout this entire period covered so far, though often shown to be a kaiju you could sympathize with, Gomora had always ultimately still been portrayed as the clear villain. But on December 1st, 2007, something would change drastically. Gomora was about to turn over a new leaf. Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle and the sequel, Never Ending Odyssey, were unlike any preceding Ultra series show. Rather than revolving around Ultraman battling kaiju, monsters battling other monsters would be the focus. For this to work, a heroic kaiju would be needed to take down the villainous creatures. And who did Tsuburaya Productions choose to fill this role? Why, Litra from Ultra Q, of course. Oh, and more importantly, Gomora. In the blink of an eye, the former villain, named after a sinful city, had suddenly become a main protagonist. Some suspect the decision to give this role to Gomora may have been a nod to the Digimon series, another monster battling show, since the protagonist's personal monster had a form based on Gomora. But we may never know for sure. The Gomora suit from Max was reused again for this iteration at first, and was painted to more closely resemble the original Gomora. In Never Ending Odyssey, a new suit was instead used, and the old one was painted again, this time entirely red, for one of Gomora's new transformations, which we'll get to momentarily. In the Ultra Galaxy shows, the monster's suit actor was Kazunori Yoku, who, my returning students will be interested to know, also played King in the first Heisei Ultra 7 special. According to you, the viewers, this new, reformed Gomora is the greatest of all the many iterations. So let's get into his history. Just a quick note before we begin. We'd be here all day if I went into too much detail, since this version of the kaiju has made so many appearances, but I'll try to cover all the important highlights. Here we go. Sometime prior to the first episode of Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle, a man with the blood of an alien named Ray somehow came into possession of his own Gomora, whose data was stored on a card.
What? On a card? What's the meaning of this?
By scanning it with his Battlenizer, the Gomora could be summoned at any time. Ray was discovered by the Zap Spacey crew on planet Boris, and was suffering from amnesia. All he knew is that he wanted to destroy every kaiju, with the help of Gomora. Eventually, he was convinced to join Zap Spacey, who slowly helped him discover his past over the course of the show. Meanwhile, Gomora was utilized to defeat countless monsters that threatened their safety, such as Red King, Golza, Naranga, and even a kaiju that Ray would end up adding to his own team, King. However, King Joe Black and a Zeton belonging to the evil Kate proved to be two monsters Gomora was no match for, until Ray learned to transform into Raymon, thanks to the energy of alien Ray blood flowing through him. The moment he did, Gomora, who shared a bond with his master, also underwent a transformation into EX Gomora, and was able to clobber the monsters that nearly killed him. In Never Ending Odyssey, Ray and his captain, as well as Gomora, were stranded on planet, what's it called? Oh right, it just hit me. Planet Hammer. Nailed it! On planet Hammer, aliens with rayonic blood from all over space had gathered to battle each other. Gomora had a lot more work to do. When Gomora kept destroying a Zeton and it continually reappeared, because it was a phantom, the monster took on another new form, the red one I mentioned earlier, because Ray's rage had gotten the better of him and his rayonic blood had taken over, transforming both him and his monster into violent, out-of-control maniacs. Gomora went rampaging across the planet, ripping kaiju to shreds, until Ray finally snapped out of it. Eventually, Ray learned how to cause Gomora to transform into his rayonic burst mode without going berserk himself. Gomora struggled against the monsters of another Rayonics who became Ray's rival, an alien Keel, but always prevailed in the end. In the finale of the show, Gomora in his EX form ended up teaming up with alien Keel's EX Red King to take down the pawn of the alien Rayblood, Armored Darkness. Ray's Gomora next took to the silver screen in Ultra Galaxy Legends the movie. He took out a Zoragus, just to remind audiences of his strength, and later blew up a Black King. However, things didn't go so smoothly in the climactic battle against the 100 monster army. Ray lost control of himself and entered burst mode, causing Gomora to do the same. The out-of-control kaiju turned on his allies and mortally wounded Ultra 7, who died. Luckily, Ray's friends helped him regain control of himself, and Gomora was able to go right back to work helping Ultraman Zero and the other Ultramen take out the monster army. Oh, and if you're ashamed of me for glossing over Ultra 7's death, calm down. He was revived at the end of the movie. Ray's Gomora also appeared in a prequel special and a sequel special to Ultraman Zero's next movie. In the first, Gomora had to battle a robotic doppelganger of himself, Mecha Gomora. I smell another Godzilla reference. That reminds me, I promised we were going to cover the similarities between Godzilla and Gomora, right? Guess there's no time like the present to take that topic on. We'll get back to the history in a moment. How does that sound, students?
Wow, that is an ultra big pile of dirt, man. Yeah, sounds good, Professor.
Great, let's begin. Godzilla and Gomora's Japanese names, Gojira and Gomora, are only one character away from being the same. Godzilla is called the King of the Monsters, and Gomora inherited the name the Prince of the Monsters. I suppose from the title of his debut episodes, even though the name originally seems to have been intended to refer to a child who appeared in those episodes. If you count Alien Baltan as the flagship Seijin of Ultraman, Gomora is arguably the flagship monster, just like Godzilla. Both have a fiery form as well as a mecha doppelganger. As I started to mention earlier, they both began as dinosaurs, Godzillasaurus and Gomorasaurus respectively. Also, grunts from actor Ted Cassidy, who played Godzilla in the Hanna-Barbera animated Godzilla series, have been used to enhance Gomora's roar. Godzilla is of course known for his similarity to Ultraman monsters who are portrayed with disguised Godzilla suits, but you've got to admit, he's got a lot in common with Gomora too. Okay, back to the history. So, Gomora was fighting a Mecha Gomora. Well, he lost, but later he fought his imitation again and won, with help from Ultraman Zero. He also took out several imitation Ultra Brothers. Mecha Gomora would go on to make several more appearances, but since he is just a robot designed to look like Gomora, and not the kaiju himself, we won't be covering his history today. Perhaps in a future video. Ray's Gomora next appeared in Ultraman Zero Gaiden, Killer the Beatstar, and was summoned to take down a Legionoid on a planet filled with robotic monsters. He handled the monster with ease, but then was overwhelmed by many more robotic kaiju. So Gomora had to recharge his batteries. Get it? Anyway, despite 3 being too many robots for Gomora to handle at first, he later took on an entire army of King Joes in part 2 of the special. And then, after he, Ray, and their allies escaped the planet, the Zap Spacey team, Ray, and his Gomora were never seen again. Just gone. They'd been planning a vacation in their final appearance. Maybe it's still going on? Who knows? But here's what we do know. Ray's Gomora had caused the public's perception of the monster to shift greatly. The monster was now recognized as a hero. Okay, we have now finally entered the last era of Gomora's history, the post-Ultra Galaxy era. Influenced both by Ray's heroic Gomora and the evil Gomoras that preceded him, from about 2014 to now, we've gotten to see a wide range of varieties of the kaiju. I couldn't find too many behind-the-scenes facts from this era, so this will mostly be in-universe history. Let's get into it. A spark doll of the monster cameoed in the Ginga series, and we got to witness a battle first between Gomora and 2 kaiju with huge eyes, and then between several varieties of Gomora in the Ginga Theater special. Several Mega Monster Rush Ultra Frontier episodes revolved around the Rush Hunters hunting down a Super Earth Gomora. Yep, another new form. But don't worry, there will be more. Episode 6 of Ultraman Ginga S brought Gomora back yet again. A renegade Victorian girl named Hiyori transformed into the kaiju with a spark doll to get revenge on the other Victorians. She fought Ultraman Ginga until the benevolent kaiju Shepherdon interrupted the fight, which convinced Hiyori to have a change of heart. She tried to help take down a fire Golza, but had to exit the battle after Gomora's tail was ripped off. How many times can you lose your tail, Gomora? You're reminding me of Eeyore. Ultraman X introduced another heroic version of the monster. It was stuck in Spark Doll form, and was under the care of Daichi Uzora, a member of Xio. A cybernetic copy of this toy kaiju was created, and the data was put on a cyber card.
I'm stuck on a card again?
Which allowed Ultraman X access to the Cyber Gomora armor. Armor is cool, but what the Xio defense team really wanted to do with Cyber Gomora was get it to materialize so it could help Ultraman X, which didn't work at first until the battle against King Joe in episode 11. Cyber Gomora finally joined the battle and helped X take out the robot. The monster appeared a few more times in the show in its cyber form, and Zeo was even able to take things a step further and materialize Gomora in his normal form, though complications arose. Occasionally, the kaiju transformed into EX Gomora and went berserk against its will, but in the end everything ended well for the monster. If you count still being stuck as a spark doll in a cyber card as a happy ending anyway. Gomora only appeared on a card in Orb.
Ugh, what is it with people putting me on cards?
But the next series, Jeed, introduced another new version of the monster. Skull Gomora is a kaiju that was created by fusing a Gomora and a Red King together with kaiju capsules. Since Skull Gomora is a fusion of creatures, he is a separate kaiju that we'll have to cover another time. But since he's half Gomora, he deserved a mention in this video. Next, we got an evil normal Gomora in Ultraman Rube, which decided to attack a city on a whim. Ultraman Rosso and Blue fought the monster for a minute, but this Gomora was just cannon fodder for Grand King Megalos to destroy. Taiga featured Skull Gomora again, so we'll skip that for today and move on to Ultraman Zet, which featured a normal version of the monster in episode 3. The monster was discovered sleeping by a construction company, and storage was called to transport the monster elsewhere. Don't they know by now that you can't just transport a Gomora like that without something going wrong? Gomora awakened from a hay fever and escaped, and Sevenger stood no chance against the beast, so Haruki became Ultraman Zet and took on the sneezing kaiju. He destroyed it, and later on began to feel ashamed for having done so. Gomora made a quick cameo on a Guts Select monitor in episode 24 of Trigger, and wow, we've actually reached Ultraman Decker! Hooray! As of the posting of this video, this is the most recent Ultraman series. Gomora appeared in the opening for the show and was the main kaiju of episode 3. And since for now we're at the end of Gamora's tale, Guts Select decided to end Gamora's tale. I have a feeling that joke won't age very well. Not that it was very funny in the first place. But yeah, anyway, Gomora lost its tail again. However, a group of Sphere soldiers infected Gomora, transforming it into yet another new Gomora form, Sphere Gomora, which in real life was actually just portrayed with a modified Skull Gomora suit. Ultraman Decker and Guts Select had to protect a hospital from the wrath of this beast, and the Ultra Hero successfully eliminated it. A group of Spheres later restored Sphere Gomora to battle Decker again along with the other Sphere monsters, but Decker was able to handle them all with the power of toys. His Ultra Dual Sword and Decker's Shield Caliber. We've reached the end, except we haven't, because now we're on to minor appearances, and then merchandise. This image is from a flashback that occurred in Ultraman Taro. Do you guys think that Gomora is depicted right there? I can't tell for sure, but if so, that's one minor appearance for the monster. Gomora was also among the cast of Ultraman Kids. Then there are the non-Ultra series productions Gomora has shown up in, such as Takeshi's Castle, Gaki no Tsukai, Daikon 3 and Daikon 4, and Yugen Jiko Sisters Shushutorian, among others. The monster has burrowed its way into other media besides TV and movies, of course, too, such as comics like Marvel's The Rise of Ultraman and The Trials of Ultraman, or manga like Ultraman Story 0. Gomora probably owes much of its current popularity to the video game appearances it has made, specifically the Mega Monster Battle Card arcade game series that inspired the Ultra Galaxy Mega Monster Battle Show. But Gomora has appeared in many other video games as well, some of which introduced new forms of the kaiju that began as video game exclusive, and some of which still are. And now all that remains to be covered is Gomora merchandise. Really, this topic deserves its own video, and perhaps at some point I'll make one. So many Gomora figures exist. Bullmark, Bandai's Ultra Monster series, X+, SH Monster Arts, Banpresto, and many more. Even some of the little-known types of Gomora have received figures. Oh, and then of course there are cards too.
Ah! On a card again? I'll get revenge.
Here are several Gomora figures I own, some of which are part of my personal collection, as well as several I am currently selling on eBay. This Gomora figure here is infamous among my family for being incredibly painful to step on. Thankfully, he's been on display on a high shelf for the last several years, and no one's been harmed in a long time. Anyway, yeah, my Gomora figures.
Professor, class is over, right? There's something I gotta tell you.
Yep, I think we've completed the history of Gomora. If one of you viewers noticed that I missed something, be sure to leave a comment so that I can add that piece of history to the description. And I think that covers everything. What did you want, Pencil Leopard? Kishimu-kun has been burrowing really deep underground all during this class, and I've been hearing really weird sounds from down in the hole he made. What? Why didn't you tell me sooner? Where's the hole? Over here. Kishimu-kun? Are you okay down there?
Hold on, coming up.
Ah!
Hey, Professor, I think it's really true. The underground heat really does work wonders. Except for some reason I feel like I lost my tail somewhere down there. But anyway, Professor, where'd you go?
Car!